You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast, live from Washington, D.C., our nation's festering swampy capital, here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WYBC. Whether you're joining us via the radio syndication network, podcast, TV, wherever you're tuning in from, I hope it's the YouTube live stream at Daily Signal. That chat there is one of the things that causes me existential anguish and dread. Speaking of existential anguish and dread, we've got a great series of reactions all over the place due to a huge policy shift, a brand new war breaking out. No, none of that at all. Actually, this is just a case of the President of the United States team putting yard signs out in front of the White House. The White House, to kind of celebrate some accomplishments from the second Trump administration's first 100 days, has put out a series of yard signs in the front of the White House lawn that shows different individuals who have been arrested. These are illegal immigrants who have committed extremely heinous crimes and have either been deported to foreign prisons or deported to who knows where. And this is something that the left has lost their ever-loving mind over, suggesting, as many did over on the bastion of intellect Reddit and other social media platforms for those who struggle for a living, that this is a sign of fascism because apparently the Nazis used to put yard signs out about the Jews or something. I am trying to read some of the arguments that they're making. They're not actually legible in any way, shape, or form. And that's in part because there really isn't an argument to articulate against the United States, against the president and his administration so far with illegal immigration. The one argument they've been able to make is that Trump is moving fast and breaking things. And the Democrats counted on if the Trump administration moved forward and, let's say, deported someone too early. Rest assured, an individual like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the El Salvadorian MS-13 member who was wanted by El Salvador for committing capital crimes in El Salvador, deporting that guy early, yeah, he was still supposed to be deported, but if they just said, well, he didn't get all of his due process and it was a huge mess and that, oh, this was just the sign of the end times, then that was going to stop Trump. That was going to sour the president with Americans in the polls. No, in fact, this is the key thing that has been keeping Trump aloft. Because right now, what Trump has been rather unstable on is the economy. It turns out that when the president of the United States steps into a room and throws a bowling ball at existing trade agreements, therefore making the markets a lot less predictable, which is, what the markets subsist on, that's going to cause a lot of wackiness, wonkiness, roller coastering, and economic strategies playing out when you have Howard Lutnick and Peter Navarro pulling one way and Scott Bessent and Elon Musk pulling the other. That's the economy side of things that has been a bit of a rough start for the Trump administration that is now being smoothed out. So while that negativity in the polls is certainly going to improve, and I am calling it now, for better or for worse, barring a major war that breaks out, God, please keep us from such a horrible atrocity occurring, I do not think at this point the Trump administration is going to see numbers dip below what, at this, again, barring really bad political optics of a situation of Republicans snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, the economic turmoil is already kind of past. Now, as new trade deals are hammered out and China's boxed in and forced to kind of play by the system, and we'll talk about this in a little bit later, this allows the more powerful momentum-building aspects of the Trump administration so far, like cutting DEI and waste from government programs or making Social Security more secure to prevent fraud by the digital Social Security system that's coming into play, or how the Trump administration is going about handling massive illegal immigration raids, capturing criminals and those who aid and abet them. That's very popular with Americans. Over 80% of Americans, according to recent polling data, are in favor of the grabbing and the deporting of individuals as quickly as possible. And while over the weekend, on the Sunday specials, as it were, Meet the Press on NBC, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was pushed a little bit. Well, aren't you deporting children, children with cancer, paralyzed from head to toe, and also they're probably brilliant geniuses, and they've been beaten every day. These poor children, you've deported them. How could you be so cruel? And here was Marco Rubio's response.
Our audience, 3 U.S. citizen children have been deported with their mothers. Now, this is according to the Washington Post. The family's lawyer says one of them is a 4-year-old with stage 4 cancer, deported without medication or ability to contact doctors. The family's lawyers are also saying their clients were denied communication with family and legal representatives before being deported. And it's raising concerns about the issue of due process, that it's being violated. So let me ask you, is everyone on U.S. soil, citizens and non-citizens, entitled to due process?
Yes, of course. But let me tell you, it looks an immigration standing. The laws are very specific. If you're in this country unlawfully, you have no right to be here, and you must be removed. That's what the law says. Somehow, over the last 20 years, we've completely lost this notion that somehow or completely adopted this idea that, yes, we have immigration laws, but once you come into our country illegally, it triggers all kinds of rights that can keep you here indefinitely. That's why we were being flooded at the border. And we've ended that, and that's why you see a historically low number of people not just trying to cross our border, trying to cross the border into Panama, all the way down in the Darien Gap. I mean, it's been a huge help for those countries as well. On the headline, that's a misleading headline. Okay, 3 U.S. citizens, ages 4, 7, and 2, were not deported. Their mothers, who are legally in this country, were deported. The children went with their mothers. If those children are U.S. citizens, they can come back into the United States if there's their father or someone here who wants to assume them. But ultimately, who was deported was their mothers who were here illegally. The children just went with their mothers. But it wasn't like, you guys make it sound like ICE agents kicked down the door and grabbed the 2-year-old and threw him on an airplane. That's misleading. Yeah. That's just not true.
Just to be clear, because I do want to get to the overhaul at the State Department, is it the U.S. policy to deport children, even U.S. citizens, with their families, and I hear what you're saying, without due process, just to be very clear there?
Well, no. Again, if someone's in this country unlawfully, illegally, that person gets deported. If that person is with a 2-year-old child or has a 2-year-old child and says, I want to take my child with me, well, then you have 2 choices. You can say, yes, of course you can take your child, whether they're a citizen or not, because it's your child. Or you can say, yes, you can go, but your child must stay behind. And then your headlines would read, U.S. holding hostage 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 7-year-old while mother deported. So the parents make that choice. I imagine those 3 U.S. citizen children have fathers here in the United States. Yeah. They can stay with their father. That's up to their family to decide where the children go. Children go with their parents. Parents decide where their children go. Right. The U.S. deported their mothers who were illegally in America.
Mr. Secretary.
So they're back to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, only the Maryland father isn't from Maryland, and according to Fox 54 in Baltimore, probably isn't even the father, according to a 2018 court case in which another man said that he should have custody of the children because his ex-wife was dating a gang member, likely Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So what do the Democrats really have here? Well, they already have nothing. Then you bring Tom Homan to the table, a man who is more bulldog than man. And when he steps up to the plate, he's playing for keeps. He's playing to keep America's women and children safe from the violent murders and assaults that we have seen time and time and time again during the Biden administration, which coddled these individuals and kept them in the country. Again, it was the Biden administration that ordered Tennessee Highway Patrol, who suspected Kilmar Abrego Garcia of being involved in human trafficking, to be released, to be let go, even though he was driving the car at the time of a known human trafficker. Tom Homan doesn't mess around with that. Here's Tom Homan at this morning's press briefing.
And as far as releasing so many people, you know why the Biden administration released millions of people in the United States? No one ever talks about it. I'll talk about it. Why did they release people into the interior of the United States and put them, rather than put them into an ice bed? Why not put them in an empty ice bed at $127 a night rather than in a hotel room at $500 a night? They did it on purpose, because when you put them in ice detention bed, they get a hearing in 35 days. Court records show 9 out of 10 people claim asylum, get order removal, they're gone. But if you release them and put them in a hotel room at $500 a night, their hearings could be 5, 7, 9 years if you pull out all appeals. And what are they hoping for then? that another Democrat administration is in power. They can award an amnesty to millions. This is about selling this country off for future political power. That's what it was. The law clearly says if you arrive at our border without proper documentation, you shall be detained. Not maybe, not think about it, shall. And that's what President Trump's doing. Catch and release is over. That's what the law says, and that's what we've done.
With Tom Homan leading that kind of a charge, is the kind of result that's being brought to the table just a lot of talk? And for a while, we were looking at the numbers of deportations and other administrations, and there was a lot of concern. And now we're starting to see, whether it's through Secretary Kristi Noem or Attorney General Pam Bondi, or of course the border czar Tom Homan, we see three massive moves by the federal government, two of which involve large-scale raids in the last couple of days, one of which is the arrest of Judge Dugan in Milwaukee. Now, the two raids, 800 illegal immigrants arrested in a massive raid with cooperation that we haven't ever actually seen before between the Florida law enforcement agencies and Immigration Customs and Enforcement, and then a just over 100 illegal immigrant raid that took place in Colorado Springs. The Colorado Springs raid is particularly interesting because it was a bust of a large underground prostitution, drug smuggling operation. Hopefully not at the same time, but you can never tell with these kinds of places. Wash your hands after visiting one, boys and girls. The really gross part about this 100 illegal immigrant group operating in this Colorado Springs, literally pink cocaine or 2C production facilitation mill, is that there were U.S. Army service members actively serving in the U.S. military who were providing armed security and participating in the drug manufacturing and the distribution. There is corruption, whether it's at the bottom rungs and it's opportunistic soldiers or sailors or Marines trying to get in on something a little bit extra under the table, or whether it's mid-level officers or flag officers, or perhaps state and government officials who are participating, who are looking the other way, who are actively giving oxygen to the flame that is the crisis of illegal immigrant crime in this country. And after years of individuals trying to whistle past the graveyard, the Democrats are still trying to do this, by the way. Despite, you talk about the Trump administration's kind of rough approval numbers, the Democrats' approval numbers in Congress are so low. We've never seen anything like this in how the American public, since we've begun modern polling, has viewed the political parties in this country. And Scott Jennings over at CNN, a personal favorite and friend of the show, who is basically credited with wetting the pants and rising the ratings of CNN every single evening, has pointed out quite clearly that you can talk about the Trump administration having a below 50% all the way down to the roughest polls, a 38% approval rating, whereas congressional Democrats are anywhere between 22 and a ceiling of 28% in an approval rating. They're not even breaking 50 in their own party. And this is supposed to be some kind of a cry for change. This is where you would see AOC and Bernie take the lead and get out there and suggest something new. But no, they fell for the exact same nonsense regarding Kilmer Abrego Garcia, and now they're falling for the exact same nonsense with Judge Dugan, a federal judge in Wisconsin, who made the decision to give an illegal immigrant who the feds were there to take into custody directions to leave the building in a way that obstructs justice according to federal code, in a way to prevent an individual who should be deported from the country and who should face federal justice a way out so that she could preserve her own political whatever. And now you have subsequent judges that are considering halting all court cases together in some divine act of bravery. And it's not going to work because, first of all, don't pick the worst people to go in defense of. The Democrats haven't learned this lesson. So whether it's a judge or whether we're talking about AOC or whether we're talking about Adam Schiff or Schumer, who now announces that he's not leaving, he's not stepping down, he thinks he's got the best solution against Trump because that's, I guess, worked so well so far. You have individuals like Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who have decided to step in front of the public and now are calling for mass unrest and pushback and other kinds of perhaps unwise bits of advice for the Democrat Party, given their affiliation for burning down American cities and car dealerships.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption, but I am now. That we have, we must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box.
We'll be back in just a second to talk about another Democrat governor, Tim Walz, with Rebecca Downs. I believe she's on the line. I'm going to head over to the Hit studio and take that call. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
There was a girl I knew. She said she cared about me.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, live from Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, in the room that I'm in, if I look directly at the camera, you get these two big, beautiful glares on these glasses of mine. So I'm not trying to be extra serious or dramatic. The glasses are just going to come off for this entire interview, for which we've got Rebecca Downs of townhall.com. Some new stuff from Tim Walz. You remember Tim Walz, his exciting choral kicks, his fake manliness. He wore a camo hat, for crying out loud. Rebecca, tell us about Tim Walz.
Right. So Tim Walz, I like to say, was then Vice President Kamala Harris's very poorly vetted running mate, if he was even vetted at all. And he's still in office as governor of Minnesota. He may actually run again for re-election. And he's still making headlines, right? So last week was the State of the State address, and Tim Walz went on a narrative. I noticed it was the one clip he shared to his Twitter X account.
Was it a narrative or was it more like an angry rant? Like imagine you have left
Aren't they
your
all
cat
angry rants?
Well, I mean, sometimes he kind of like Gavin Newsom, right? He'll do his little podcast and he'll step aside the narrative and be like, can't we all just, like he juts his chin everywhere when Newsom talks.
He does.
We can just get along.
Beta
Was this
male.
one of those from Walz, or was this more like what kind of rant are we talking about here?
He decided he was going to rant about freedom, right? About how
the governor of Minnesota is going to rant about freedom.
Yes, unironically too. He said, here in Minnesota, that freedom means several things, which includes freedom from hunger and poverty. Okay, start with a nonpartisan issue, but then also freedom to worship or not, as well as the freedom to be who you are any way you choose. And then he said, that is a birthright, not dependent on how much money you make, where your family came from, or the current issue of the day. That's what freedom looks like.
Man, you realize that if someone on the right used the word birthright, again, it would be whatever. Okay, so we actually do have the clip. Let's roll it.
Yeah.
And let's talk about freedom. Here in Minnesota, that freedom means several things. It means freedom from hunger and poverty. It means the freedom to worship or not. It means the freedom to be who you are any way you choose. And that is a birthright, not dependent on how much money you make, where your family came from, or the current issue of the day. That's what freedom looks like.
Okay, definitely in the running for one of the most disingenuous roles. He's real proud of himself, too. Like I said, we got that from his social media. You just wrote the article on this one. Give us a little bit of the reaction, really flavor this one for us.
Okay, so it's interesting to me that he waited a few days to post it, but it's already gotten over 1,000 replies, and many of them are pointing out, like, dude, during the COVID pandemic, you had a tip line for people to snitch on their neighbors and or on businesses. And these businesses, they were punished if they weren't, complying with COVID regulations.
Stop.
And then
Wait. I know that you're listening to this because there are other things to go into. We have to stop. The man who just gave a speech on freedom for you and your kin, you got to go out and get it. The getting out there, big Mr. Bold Brave man. He had a snitch line.
Yeah.
So you could report your neighbor to the Stasi. And he's talking about freedom to worship or not. Tell me, were Minnesotans or whatever those poor, decrepit wretches of the worst state in the Midwest are called? What were they allowed to go to church during COVID?
Well, in a lot of blue states, there were a lot of COVID restrictions on houses of worship. I'm not exactly sure on the timeline with the churches in Minnesota,
Joseph,
but I know in another.
Up for us. Did Minnesota have those kind of issues? He'll tell us in a second here, because I know they had public gathering restrictions.
Yeah,
and if you're going to go
outdoors.
Hold a vigil or a funeral, part of a huge part of Christian worship, of Jewish worship is, in fact, I know, shocking, is praising God that they have taken their soul to heaven. And so I'm amazed. They did, in fact, have those restrictions. Thanks, Joseph.
Oh, yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me. California did.
It's bewildering that this man has the gall, but that's only one thing. No, keep going, Rebecca. I'm sure that Tim Walz and his choral kicks had more.
So another thing that came up when he was running as Kamala Harris's very poorly vetted, if he was poorly at all, running mate.
Yeah, Captain Stolen Valor.
Right? So that was certainly an issue. But he also said, this is another quote from him when he went on MSNBC in 2022, that there's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy. And he actually prefaced that by saying, I think we need to push back on this. Of course,
here's the clip of Governor
Walz was the one who got pushed back. Yeah.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Of course, push back at the time. You get out there on the political campaign trail, you say something that even you could tell the hosts are like, you said those words.
Yeah.
And then to turn around now and say that because Trump is in power, you're the party of freedom for you and everyone you know, boy, what a bold choice.
That's a very good way of putting it. A very good way of putting it. He's such a clown. Like it defies reality to me.
I'm looking at the bench heading into 2028 because we're here we're at the end of the 100 days into Trump's second term, right? And we're looking at Joe Biden's era in between them. And I've made the case on the show tonight already that I think that the 4-year off period was very good for the Trump team to get all of the ducks in a row instead of being, given the back end slap by other people that aren't fond of him but still in the administration. And we look at the 4-year gap that the Democrats might claim they're taking, a 4-year gap to fix a few things before they run again in 28. This guy is on the charts for people to be the next nominee. Now, he's not high on the charts. He's not as up there as Kamala Harris or AOC, but he's on the charts. This is what they got.
I don't know. He's like a walking meme, right? What really got to me too was the town hall, the national town halls we did. And you and I have spoken about those, that he couldn't even, and I remember reading an Axios article that he couldn't even be bothered to do them in his home state. So that's very telling to me about, okay, does this guy have national implications or national plans? There are national implications to his town halls.
This is something that both parties do struggle with, though, is that they're ready to ratchet up the platitudes. And it's very easy to provide platitudes when the opposite administration is in power, and you're going to get out there and say, or the other side of the political aisle is in power, and you're going to get out there and say, well, we believe in freedom for you and everyone you know. I'm just going to go right into the really bad William Wallace, but more like the child, because my voice isn't as strangled as his from the death of his wife at the hands of the English. Anyway, it's very easy as the opposition party to get in there and say,
Of
oh, hey, here are
course.
these platitudes. We want freedom. We want you to XYZ. But the problem with Walz in this particular situation is that when he was on the campaign trail, he was still the governor of the state of Minnesota. Now, as the opposition, one of the opposition people, he's still the governor of Minnesota. So those platitudes actually have to have stuff behind them, right? Policies that he's proposed, things that the Minnesota State House has put forward. Do you see anything in his governance at all that would suggest that there is any weight, any, dare I say, girth behind the platitudes? Because J.B. Pritzker can say that he at least has a few policies he's pushed forward.
Not really in Minnesota. I mean, they keep reelecting him there, but I remember I did a piece for Town Hall not too long after he was selected as Kamala Harris's running mate, and his reelection numbers, his electoral history kept going down. Trump and Vance actually won his home county last November. I remember my colleague Madeline Leesman did a piece on that. So I don't think he has a lot to show for other than his platitudes and his dramatic rants, and he moves his hands a lot and he gestures and even does the chorus line kicks. I don't think he's got much to it.
Radio crew, we're going to send you guys over to commercial for the FCC clock, and I'll continue this over on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, this is something I'm really glad you brought up. And one of the key problems with Walz is he gets out there and he says, well, hey, my home county, my hometown where I grew up, the place I'm from, they voted for Trump and Vance. And he tries to do this kind of, we're all the same, we're unifying. You see AOC going to Idaho and doing the same kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
We're all the same. We're all palsy-wowsy, right? Don't let them divide us. Yet I remember during COVID and then during the presidential campaigns that it was Tim Walz. In fact, it wasn't even Kamala Harris. It was Tim Walz who would get out there and suggest that half the country were these MAGA evil rural hick extremists that weren't as advanced as these urbanites.
I'm glad you brought that up, too, because I remember covering up until literally days before the election, right? Kamala Harris's closing speech was she made everything about Trump, and did nothing to walk back Tim Walz's comments, and then doubling down on his comments that Trump supporters who dared to go to the Madison Square Garden rally on October 20, it was either the 27th or the 28th, so about 9 days before the election, were akin to Nazi supporters.
And I think some of you don't miss on this. Go do your Google on this. Donald Trump's got this big rally going at Madison Square Garden. There's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden. And don't think that he doesn't know for 1 second exactly what they're doing there.
Because the Nazis dared to have a rally in Madison Square Garden hosted a rally, but it was in 1939 in February and at a different location. So
I'm glad again, I'm very glad that you brought that up too, because it's not just the kind of the rural areas that he's demonizing. He really was going after anyone, including those in New York. Republicans are
traveling to New York,
a minority in the Big Apple, but those who came in, either from Manhattan or from Long Island, that made the inroads to come see Trump in this particular rally, he was so quick to say this is, I remember history too. So when he gets up there and he says freedom, and he gets up there and preaches all of these niceties, I'm curious.
His idea of it.
Right, yeah, his very warped, twisted idea of it. Just because you write so many tip sheets, because you follow these things for Town Hall, not the political dumpster fire kind, but the excellent side of great commentary and reporting kind of Town Hall. What do you see in the next couple of months? Because there has to be some kind of a stabilization point for the Democrats to be solvent. I'm not even talking about productive, to even be a functional party in the midterms. They have to get it together in the next couple of months. Tim Walz is running his mouth. I mean, he has got the pedal to the metal. He is running that as far as it'll go, as many RPMs as he can get. So do we see someone tell him to shut up and sit down? Or do we see Tim Walz causing a stumbling block for perhaps the midterms out in Michigan in the upper Midwest? Or excuse me, Minnesota in the upper Midwest?
Yeah, good luck. with that, trying to tell him to do anything. It's funny, though, that you mentioned Michigan. Michigan is a key swing state. They have a U.S. Senate race coming up. You just played a clip last week of Haley Stevens ranting on the House floor. She's running for Senate.
Yeah, speaking of angry, incoherent rants, the old pink-gloved champion herself. Unfortunately, Rebecca, we're running a little bit short on time. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Rebecca Downs, townhall.com. Thanks for stopping by and giving us the down low.
Thanks so much for having me.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, live from Washington, D.C.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. I'm live here in our nation's capital with Elise McCue over from our news and video production team, and of course our White House correspondent, Elizabeth Mitchell. How's it going?
Thanks for having us on. It's been great. It's great Monday.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Great Monday.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting you to say, "Oh, thanks, Mr. Cleaver, for having." No, I mean, it's been chaotic. The first 100 days has been insane. All three of us, I believe, has sprouted gray hair. We're all far too young to sprout gray hair.
And that's why I sat on this side, because my gray hair is on this side. So don't look too hard.
Okay, I got a few questions here. Questions that we've received before. We haven't really been able to cover them, and I figure that if we're going to talk about stuff that involves ladies, me not just doing the feminine voice and mocking it seems like a better way to answer the question. So the vibes of the first 100 days, right? This has been the most in-your-face administration we have seen probably since Teddy Roosevelt. I don't know if and that was very just Americana as a whole. This is very, Trump is doing what he said he would. It feels like a very masculine presidency so far. How's it coming off to ladies?
A huge vibe is, if you do not enter this country illegally, and if you do, bad things will happen to you. I think that vibe has been very pervasive. I was at the White House today for the 100th day press conference with Tom Homan. Walking in, I was met with the faces of 100 illegal immigrant criminals who have committed very heinous crimes. Tom Homan delivered that strong message that we've heard so many times. If you come here, you will be deported, you will be punished, you will go to jail, etc. I think that is a very masculine vibe, a very strong vibe, and it has been delivered to every American and every person in the world that if you come here illegally, you're going to get kicked out.
At least your eyes are on the socials. Tom Homan walks up. The dude looks part bulldog. Honestly, probably one of the most bulldogish people I've seen since the late Margaret Thatcher. So the question I have for you is, online, how does this play off? Because in the first administration, it's so cruel and mean, and I don't like it. How's it going off now?
Oh my gosh, it's great. And Tom Homan is a great example of what happens when you just get in there and you don't care what people think about you. And he's said that. It's not just the vibe he gives off, but he goes in there and he goes, listen, I know a lot of people don't like me, but I don't care, because when you go in and you have a strong head like that, it really just, everyone, their complaints and their shouts and their issues with you, it just seems so small in comparison, because he's like, listen, I don't care. It rolls right off of me. And that's the leader that I want to see.
I think there was an era in Congress that we saw for a long time. And then there's still people who are friendly with each other off of the Senate or the House floor. And a lot of voters who are told during campaign season that you need to despise this other person who wants to fundamentally change everything about your life and tell you what to do. I feel as though we're starting to see some of that. I don't want to say personal animosity, although if you watch Jasmine Crockett and Marjorie Taylor Greene on the House floor, yeah, there's some personal animosity there. Do you think that, at least in the White House press room, that tension has now carried over to when the cameras are off, as opposed to back when maybe there was just a little bit of a performative back and forth and then everyone just kind of walked away happy? What have you seen actually on campus?
I think that what we saw at the White House Correspondents Association dinner, which I did not attend, but did take place this weekend, saw some clips of it. There is just a vibe that it is our job, the White House correspondents, to oppose Trump. They did not even toast to Trump. They toasted to the First Amendment instead of the president, which is fairly unheard of. I think.
Well, do they all like line up and give kisses to the AP journalist president? Or, I mean, what?
No doubt about it. Somebody said that they're all really struggling right now. All the White House correspondents need a hug. I'm not included in that. I do not want a hug. I can say I'm doing well, do not need a hug. But that vibe is definitely this idea that these journalists are just little soldiers fighting the Trump administration. They're, fighting the good fight in there, standing up for truth, I think is kind of the chip on these people's shoulders.
I used to think about this when I was a teacher, how every public teachers union, how administrations, how teachers themselves, many of them, definitely not all of them, wanted to be seen as heroes. Oh, I'm a hero. I'm wonderful. I'm going every day. And if you disagree with me, then you don't appreciate my sacrifice. Gen Z mocks the crap out of that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. You see all the memes where you'll see the yard sign there's where it says we stand with essential workers and USAID workers. And they're just going to add White House Correspondents Association members to
the
it. The
White House correspondent, like fresh on the pride flag. And I mean, I got to be honest with you, though. This is what really gets under the skin of a lot of people who tune into the show, a lot of people who are outside the Beltway, is they see this performative circus and then they claim on top of it that in real life, they're really struggling and suffering. And these, the guy who was chasing JD Vance, or not, excuse me, not Jim Banks, the senator and from Indiana into the elevator. Hi, why was I fired? It was so wrong and terrible. Yet when you get into this community, right? You get into the city. I'm not seeing from that class of individuals the suffering that they're portraying when they're groveling at the microphone at the press conferences.
I think you're right. I think that while a lot of these people, I have good things to say about, they're, doing their job, reporting, to the rest of their ability. A lot of these people are seeing themselves as it's their job to fight the Trump administration. You can see that in the questions they ask. They clearly come in with an agenda that they're going to try to make Caroline Leavitt, put her on the spot, make her look bad, make the president look bad, that type of thing. It's not so much about finding the truth, which both sides want to know. We want to hear hard-hitting questions, real questions to get some news, break some news, answer the questions the American people want to know. But these constant adversarial questions that a lot of times have even already been answered, already been asked by other people. That's the issue.
We've talked about this before. And so this is a great time that we're here actually getting this answer from you. Is it true? And I don't actually sit down and watch the press conferences from end to end because I have a life. And also I'm not the person on the daily signal they send to suffer. We have you for that. So do we actually hear from ABC and then MSNBC or NBC and CNN and AP the exact same question asked over and over?
To be fair, not every time. Sometimes these people do ask good questions.
Not every time.
But a lot of the time,
really?
We do hear 5-6 people ask the same question. And Caroline will say, I don't want to hear it again.
Is it the same question, like there's a slight variation on it, like kids playing telephone, or is it pretty verbatim the same question?
We'll have a slight variation, a little bit of different wording. It seems like they came in, they made their question at home, and they're going to ask it come hell or high water. But one example that stands out to me particularly is the day the Atlantic story about the Signal chat broke.
Oh, yeah.
Every single reporter in there asked, are you going to fire Mike Walz? Are you going to fire Mike Walz? And Caroline said, I've answered this 5 times in 5 different ways. I don't want to hear it again. And that's really a good example to me.
But I don't like the answer that you gave us. We need you to change your mind on the spot. This is one of the things that I believe factors into a lot of the polling. We've talked about some of the scandals. We've talked about the media reaction. These things would tilt the polls wildly in the first administration. Mm-hmm. And you didn't really see a lot of responsive political content yet. That was still in the area where, or I should say the era where you would have the kind of the younger commentariats do a video occasionally. Now there's a political commentary reaction video for everything. Is it too oversaturated at this point to kind of move the needle 100 days in? What's really driving, from what you're looking at, again, with the next generation getting involved, it's more to the right. What's driving them, if anything at all?
Well, you bring up an interesting point. To a certain extent, it is a little bit oversaturated with all of the reactions to, oh, Trump said this, Caroline Leavitt announced this, yada, yada, yada. But if you remember what the goal of it is. It's not necessarily to move the needle in any direction drastically or change opinion, but it's basically just taking back, especially on the conservative side, taking back the space that the left and the leftist media has taken over the past few years. So I really don't think I don't think it's overdone, but I also do think that there is an alternative reason.
The last thing that I wanted to kind of bring this to a close, I guess maybe the right word to end on. I don't know, going into the next 100 days, with the economy starting to stabilize a little bit, with some trade deals very likely coming down the pike, what do you think, from where you are, is going to be the focal point of kind of the press conference room? The MS-13 thing didn't work. The economy thing, they missed their window completely. We're getting into the position where the Department of Justice, where Department of Homeland Security is actually starting to tackle those that are acting illegally. Again, like the case with the allegedly with Judge Dugan. In that White House press room, you kind of run the risk of the other side just glad handing anything. What do you see as like kind of the next big thing happening in that press room, if you get any kind of a sense at all?
First 100 days, we've seen a lot of President Trump's agenda be put into law, one could say, with all the executive orders, et cetera. And I think after all of that, of course, there's more of the agenda to implement. But I think that now we're really going to see the follow through on those first 100 days, all these executive orders. Is Congress going to codify them? How will the administration work with Congress? What's going to happen with the budget reconciliation bill? Of course, the foreign policy scene is also something where we're going to see a lot of action, hopefully, in the next 100 days, with the Russia-Ukraine war, with the Israel-Hamas conflict. And so I think we're going to see a lot on that will be big in the news going forward.
Do you think that the politics and the intensity of spending so much time on the Trump administration is starting to wear off? We talked about oversaturation. I mean, is there just an oversaturation in social media anyway? I'm looking for what there is left to be outraged about on social media, and I don't know if I can find it.
It's difficult because on social media, the outrage, it all just kind of feels fake on either side, because whenever the left gets really outraged about something, there's very easily, accessibly a right commentary where they say like, hey, this actually isn't what you're getting worried about. And when the right gets really worried about something, it kind of just doesn't really follow through. So it's really up in the air what there is left to scrutinize. But I do think, like Elizabeth said, having all of these executive orders and all these decisions by the Trump administration going to Congress, that's when all the drama is going to start. And that's where we're going to be able to scrutinize our elected officials more.
Well, there you have it. The vibes of this very, very just in-your-face aggressive administration, something a lot of Americans voted for. Elise McCue, our Gen Z expert and also our fantastic news producer. And then, of course, Elizabeth Mitchell, our White House correspondent. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast live from Washington, D.C. here on the Daily Signal.
I got jacked, I was on the same track. Back up.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast, live from Washington, D.C., here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. There is a bit of international news on the floor that we need to discuss sooner rather than later. And these would be the tri-problems of India and Pakistan, of Russia and Ukraine, and then China and the United States. India and Pakistan, which are in a pre-hot war situation. It is a Cold War quickly turning hot after a horrible terrorist attack perpetuated by Pakistani radical Islamists in the Kashmir region of India. India has now kicked a ton of Pakistani individuals out of the country, and this is where my team comes in. So special thanks to producer Daniel and producer Nick for giving us up-to-date quotes and current kind of maneuvers from around the world based on how India and Pakistan, Russia, Ukraine, and then, of course, the U.S. and China are acting. Also, a special thanks as well to Open Source Int Defender over on X, who posts a lot of military intelligence reports and small snippets from around the world in these movements. So as of April 28th, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his Man Ki Baat address, he expressed grief over the Kashmir terror attack. And he says, this is the key phrase, he said, quote, "The terrorist attack that took place in Pahalgam on the 22nd of April has hurt every citizen of the country," end quote. That's a very powerful statement because kind of revenge for terrorist attack kind of military maneuvers are a common facet of basically the 1980s forward. So on April 27th, an unnamed top Indian government source quoted by the Indian Express, so take this with a slightly curry-flavored grain of salt, suggested military action against Pakistan. Quote, "There will be military retaliation. Officials are discussing the nature of the strike," end quote. Now over to Pakistan. As of the 28th, Pakistan's defense minister, Khawaja Asif, warned of a, quote, "imminent Indian military incursion." We're really uncertain about what's going on in those very contested, long, bitter enemies in that part of the world. It's a much more concerning situation given that both of these are very unstable nuclear powers. India is an unstable, hot-headed nuclear power. Pakistan is a partly Islamic-controlled, unstable nuclear power. And they are itching to use these weapons on each other for the surmised goal of the ethnic cleansing of one or the other. And the issue with nukes is that nuclear fallout is that the ash kicked up from sizable yield nuclear devices, they don't stay within borders. They don't even stay over, they're not even constrained by land mass. They're carried by currents, they're carried by large gusts of wind, they're carried by weather fronts, and they can cause a serious amount of damage. And by the way, when we talk about radioactivity and from a nuclear eruption, you need to understand that this is something that has affected everyone on Earth if you haven't even known about it. The nuclear tests, which occurred in the 40s and the 50s, presented a large amount of strontium, I believe it's either strontium and cesium, in the atmosphere present, these small radioactive isotopes that come out of a lot of nuclear fallout from, again, bombs detonated in the middle of the Pacific. And it is found everywhere, in every liquid on the face of this Earth. There was a bit of cesium and a bit of strontium. That is how pervasive the fallout from nuclear radiation is. In fact, so much so that there's actually a way that you can tell counterfeit wines from before World War II, because if they were corked, they do not have inside them cesium or strontium. Every single wine after nuclear tests contain at least a small micro trace amount of cesium or strontium. So if India and Pakistan get ballistic, it does have a wider effect on the rest of the world. And by the way, this is the argument against the hyper-isolationism. This is an argument against the idea that we can just sit in our country and twiddle our thumbs and pretend it's not our problem, because here's the dirty little secret of the world. It's kind of always your problem. You can either get better at dealing with the problem, or you can do it kind of halfway like George Bush did and screwed up entire regions like we haven't seen since Sykes and Picot. Or you can sit there and end up getting the horrible effects anyway until eventually the wolves turn on you. We're seeing a different situation over in Ukraine. So when the President of the United States landed in Rome for the Pope Francis funeral, we saw him talk a little bit about a deal that's just in the works, really looking forward to seeing a couple of terms set forward to start a general ceasefire and then again a long-lasting peace. And at this point, it appears right now Zelensky and Putin, though they are suggesting Putin meeting with Steve Witkoff, Zelensky meeting directly with Donald Trump, though Zelensky and Putin are expressing kind of soft-handed platitudes about hoping everything is going to be fine, that's basically just Eastern Europeans talking out of their butt, which is what Eastern Europeans are known for. In the political sphere, should you trust anyone from the Polish government to the Czechoslovakian government, to the Czech Republic or the Slovak Republic government, got to be careful there, or the government of Hungary or Ukraine or Lithuania or Estonia or Russia or Kazakhstan? No, not at all. Now, what do we know that Zelensky and Putin do want? The territory that is contested between the two. So Russian is the aggressor, and I do mean the tri-decade aggressor, who has been inserting Russian immigrants into Crimea since like 95. 95 to 98 is when that really started. We're talking like the Sooners, like paying people to go settle in a region. Whereas Ukraine is also an incredibly corrupt government who doesn't want to see Crimea annexed by Russia, because the honest answer is because giving up territory in any way, shape, or form is a horrible thing. And then also because giving Russia more access to warm water ports, giving Russia more access and more mileage on the Ukrainian border is a scary thing for Ukraine. And Putin absolutely wants all of Ukraine. So do I hope that there is going to be some kind of movement here? Yes, I do think that you could see something like this. Again, I'm still in the permanent armistice kind of camp. I don't think it's going to be as successful as what we're likely to see regarding China and the United States. Now, again, things are still in flux, because I think until you start to see trade deals solidified between the United States and South Korea, the United States and Japan, the United States and Taiwan, the United States and Burma, because I refuse to say Myanmar is the name for the country, until you see the United States solidify the Southeast Asian trading sphere, I don't think you're going to see movement from China. And so in the meantime, I do believe you're seeing talks start to happen between China and the United States. And this is kind of funny, because Trump has already come out and said he's talked with Xi of China, and then Xi's government has come out and said, we haven't talked with Trump at all. Which, I trust communists about as far as you can throw them, which is usually towards the nearest ditch or brick wall. So at least as far as the Chinese government relations and the United States government relations are metered out over the next couple of months, it's all going to come down to whether the United States maintains an aggressive approach or whether the United States chickens out and starts licking boots. Our Virginia Allen is over in Israel right now. She's our senior news producer. She asked Ambassador Mike Huckabee about this very thing, because we're getting ready to start the fourth round of U.S.-Iranian negotiations, which are expected to take place Saturday. Here's Virginia's question and Huckabee's response.
Virginia Allen with the Daily Signal. There's a fourth round of talks expected between the United States and Iran on Saturday. Is there any world where the United States can actually come to an agreement that is a win for the U.S. in those negotiations?
If the Iranian regime would lay down any ambitions whatsoever for nuclear weaponry, if it would continue to move in a direction that it's never moved before, if it were to change its rhetoric from 46 years that says death to Israel and death to America, it's never changed. And they made it very clear that Israel is the appetizer and the United States is the entree. They've never, ever been anything but clear in that their goal is the annihilation of Israel and ultimately the annihilation of every free-thinking, free-living person on the planet. They could certainly see a breakthrough, but it's up to them, and it is on them to do it. I pray they will. I hope they will. But I think the president has been as clear as any political figure in history in saying that if they don't, there will be no holding back. And those are his words. Those are his policies. I'm simply speaking them to you and carrying them out here in this setting. I would say it this way. He's the chemist. I'm just the pharmacist. He makes the medicine. I'm just going to pass it out.
Is there a deadline for those negotiations?
I don't want to get into a calendar, but the president's patience is running out. He has said repeatedly, this is not going to go on forever and forever, and those are his words.
Now, that's a lot to dig into, and we're not going to be able to break it all down tonight. We haven't even talked about Canada yet because those elections aren't yet called. So I'm going to stay up late tonight so that we can get the top news in 10 for tomorrow morning over on the Daily Signal podcast side of things up to date. Thank you very much for stopping by on this, our live episode from Washington, D.C. We'll be here tomorrow with more great guests and a few surprises along the way. I'm Tony Kinnett, and this has been the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast. Take care.